In the thick wilderness and deep swamps of Florida, one man would become a legend during the American Civil War. His nickname was the Swamp Fox of the Confederacy. His real name was John Jackson Dickinson, but he was known as JJ Dickinson. He was born in 1816 in what was then Monroe County, Virginia, modern-day West Virginia. He was raised in South Carolina and would later join the militia, where he trained as a cavalry officer. He would eventually make his way to Florida in 1857, moving to Marion County. The area was wild and sparsely populated. He bought a plantation which he named Sunnyside. His plantation was a success, and Dickinson was a well-respected member of the community. South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union on December 20th, 1860, followed by Mississippi on January 9th, 1861, then Florida on January 9th. The Union was falling apart. Florida was far from the battlefields of Virginia and Tennessee, but it would play a crucial role in supplying food to the Confederacy. Beef, salt, and supplies were transported from Florida to Confederate armies across the South. This made Florida a target. Union forces would launch raids along the coast and eventually into the Florida interior, attempting to cut off supplies and weaken the Southern war effort. It was here, in the overlooked theater of war, that JJ Dickinson would become a hero for the South. Dickison joined the war on the side of the Confederates. He would help organize and lead Company H of the 2nd Florida Cavalry. Most units north and south fought on open battlefields. The 2nd Cavalry was different. They used speed, mobility, and surprise raids. Dickison operated across northern and central Florida. His cavalry fought with guerrilla-style warfare, striking Union forces, supply lines, and outposts before disappearing back into the wilderness. By 1864, Dickison had already begun to earn a reputation for conducting daring raids east of the St. Johns River, disrupting Union movements and supply lines. It brought him to the attention of his commanding officer, Major General Samuel Jones. After a successful campaign, General Jones issued an official report praising Dickison's actions.
I directed Captain Dickison of the 2nd Florida Cavalry, who had just returned from a most successful raid east of the St. Johns, to endeavor to get in the rear, and concentrated on a large A force as I could at Noonanville. The enemy meetings, perhaps, more opposition than they had anticipated, fell back and were followed by Captain Dickison, who attacked them on the mainland, near Cedar Keys. And though his force was outnumbered 5-1, the enemy retreated to Cedar Keys after a sharp skirmish, leaving a portion of their dead on the field. Captain Dickison reports that he killed and wounded between 60 and 70, and captured a few, with very slight loss on his part. I have heretofore frequently had occasion to report the gallant and valuable services of Captain Dickison and his command, and to present the captain, as I do now, to the favorable notice of the government.
19th century warfare was supposed to be fought like gentlemen. Infantry from both sides all lined up in tight formations, going head-to-head on the battlefield with the enemy. But in the swamps of Florida, a very different style of warfare was fought. In 1864, Dickison would attempt the unthinkable, to ambush and capture a Union warship by land. The St. Johns River was and still is one of the most important waterways in Florida. It flowed north through the heart of the interior of Florida. It was a main supply route for the Union. Federal gunboats patrolled the St. Johns, transporting troops, supplies, and patrolling deep into Confederate territory. Among these ships was the armed tugboat USS Columbine. The Columbine was a side-wheel steamer armed with artillery and infantry. For months, the Columbine successfully patrolled the Ocklawaha and St. Johns rivers, capturing vessels and destroying Confederate positions. Lola Sanchez was a Confederate spy who lived in Palatka. Her home was occupied by Union forces. She learned of a surprise attack on St. Augustine the next day. She traveled by night to Camp Davis to alert Dickison of the Union's plans. Dickison positioned his men at a bend in the river known as Horseshoe Landing, south of Palatka. He positioned artillery pieces along the banks of the river. On May 22, 1864, the USS Columbine steamed upriver, unaware of Dickison and his men. As the vessel approached the bend, Dickison's men waited. Then, the ambush began. Confederate artillery erupted from the riverbank, slamming into the Columbine. They were caught completely off guard. The Union crew scrambled to return fire. Artillery echoed across the river as smoke filled the air. The Columbine attempted to maneuver the narrow river bend, taking repeated musket and artillery fire. Dickison's men kept up a relentless fire from the shoreline. In the chaos, the Columbine ran into a mudbank. Outgunned, stuck, and under constant fire, the crew of the USS Columbine had no choice but to surrender. For the first and only time in American history, a cavalry unit captured a naval vessel by land. The Battle of Horseshoe Landing remains one of the most unusual battles during the Civil War. A land-based cavalry force defeated and captured a gunboat. Commander of the Columbine, Frank Sanborn, later wrote,
"I could discover nothing suspicious until directly abreast the landing," Sanborn said in his official report, "distant about 100 yards, when two pieces of artillery, concealed by the shrubbery and undergrowth, almost simultaneously opened fire upon me. I instantly gave orders to hook on, but unfortunately the second shot of the enemy cut my wheel chains, and at the same time the pilot abandoned the wheel and jumped over the bow. The vessel almost immediately went ashore upon a mud bank."
By the summer of 1864, Union forces were increasing pressure across northern Florida. On August 17th, Dickison learned that Union forces were heading to Gainesville. They burned train cars in the town of Stark on their way south. Dickison headed to Gainesville to cut them off. When the Union arrived, Dickinson was waiting. Gunfire erupted through the streets and surrounding buildings. The Union had nearly twice the numbers, but Dickinson used speed and the terrain to his advantage. His men hit the Union troops from multiple directions. They were completely taken by surprise. Confusion spread among the Union ranks. After 2 hours of battle, the order was given to retreat. Some men were cut off. Many were killed, wounded, or captured. The Battle of Gainesville ended in a decisive Confederate victory. The Union suffered 28 dead, 5 wounded, 86 missing or unaccounted for, 188 captured, 260 horses, and a 12-pound howitzer. The Confederate losses were 3 killed and 5 wounded. 2 died the next day. Once again, JJ Dickinson had demonstrated his skills as a commander. But by 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Major armies had been defeated across the South, and the war was coming to an end. In the final days of the war, Captain JJ Dickinson was captured near Waldo, Florida. After years of evading Union forces and countless raids, the swamp fox of the Confederacy was finally captured. After the war, he returned to civilian life. Like many other Confederate soldiers, he had to rebuild his life in a very different Florida. He served as Florida's adjutant general and wrote about Florida during the Civil War. He moved to Accohumpka, Florida, just south of Leesburg. He died in 1902 and was buried in Jacksonville. The man who had led daring raids and defied the odds became a legend for his time fighting in Florida. The Civil War is most often remembered for its large battles like Gettysburg, Antietam, and Shiloh. Florida had its own unique history during the war, and history should always be remembered. I want to thank y'all for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you on the next. Peace.